Good afternoon. My name's Ruth, and Nicola's with me today. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Ruth. Hi, everybody.
So thank you for joining us on this Monday Mix, the 1st of June. Today we are focusing on a topic which is age and stage. So we often get questions from parents which are, parents are confused about based on the date of birth of their child, what grade are they applying for in the different schools and when should they apply? So that's really the focus of our chat today. If you have any questions at all, you can ask in the comments below and we'll try to answer them. So in the comments below also, we have put over, we actually showed this one. So this is the basic information about age and stage and how your children, how you can calculate when your children will be entering. This is not all of the grades, but just the most important ones. And there's basically three systems that we look at. We look at the Hong Kong system, which is the PN, K1, K2. And they also talk about primary years, the Ps and then the Fs. What does the F stand for, Nicola?
Form. Yeah.
Form. So they changed it many, many years ago. Used to be S. Oh, no, now it's the S, actually, not the Fs. Yeah, so 3, 3, 4. But it's a very different system. So for international schools, we're typically looking at the UK system or the US system most commonly. So how do we explain the difference? Nick?
The technical bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Usually, as Ruth rightly said, schools usually refer to their class levels either by year or by grade. And it's usually grade +1 will equal the year. So for example, let's take grade 1 in the US system is equivalent to a year 2 at a school that's using a more traditional English naming system for the year groups.
Yeah. And it's so confusing, isn't it? Because you might think that, I think almost all the US schools do use grades, but do all the UK schools use years or they mix? I mean, some of them have got some really interesting and different naming conventions.
They do, especially when we're looking at the younger year groups. So with preschool age, we'll see pre-reception, reception,
foundation
year. So there's a big choice.
Yeah. So for parents, like, what is important to do is to always map those onto two things. Is the date of birth of your child is the first thing, and the Hong Kong system, we would say map it back to the Hong Kong system because that's the stable, what's continuous all the way through. My cat's making a special appearance today. Does that make sense? So, I mean, parents are so confused. What we need to talk about also is the cutoff, i.e., I've got a child born in November and then the other one is born in March. So it's really confusing for parents. So if your children are born at the end of the year, what does that mean, Nick?
Okay, so when we say the end of the year, we're talking about children that are born between the 1st of September and the 31st of December. Most of the international schools in Hong Kong will use the 31st of August as the age cutoff, but not every school. The big notable exception is ESF.
Now, why is that?
I wish I knew.
Don't we all? I mean, I remember just a couple of years ago, I was looking at moving my daughter. And so, you know, coming from a system where she was actually an older child in her class, you know, and we have this all the time, don't we, with different clients, you know, moving into an ESF school or a few of the others that follow the end of the year cutoff, you're facing the possibility of a child jumping up an entire year, which is generally not going to work for most children. So yeah, ESF, if you're listening, why is that? And could you please consider a little bit more flexibility at least, because it's really the only school that's staying fast on that, because the other schools that do on paper state a 31st of December cutoff, they do have more flexibility, don't they?
They do. And there are some schools, jumping sort of away from ESF a little bit, that very clearly state that children born in September to December, you almost have a choice whether you enter as a big baby or a small baby, so to speak. And obviously we could talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that, but it does all come back to knowing when exactly you should be making that first application to your preferred school.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions about age and stage, what class, what grade are you applying for in which particular school, and when should you apply, then please ask us in the comments below. When should the parents plan to apply to their school? Because we used to talk about entering primary school, and that's kind of a little bit of an outdated concept nowadays.
It definitely is, especially within the international sector. When you look across the board at schools, most of them have a K1. If not, they definitely have a K2. So we're talking about a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old intake, as opposed to what we used to consider year 1, the 5-year-olds being the main intake. It's also obviously worth noting, if you're looking at considering a local or an international school, that there is no K3 in an international school system. They would definitely have started primary school before that point.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So we have a lot of parents, like if you're not sure about local or international and you're sitting in a local kindergarten, you must decide if you want to consider an international school as you're entering K2. But even that's considered, it's a little bit late these days, isn't it? Because, I mean, even just a few years ago, we would have said, well, sure, you can enter, to go back to use ESF as an example, you could have entered ESF at year 1, but that's looking...
less and less likely. We're about to see the first cohort of ESF kindergarten students coming through, and next year we'll be applying for primary school that are part of the K13 program that ESF are now running. So again, they've sort of moved their main intake back to 3 years old. Right.
And that's true of most schools, isn't it? So if your child is born in, what year is it? It should be 2017.
For entry in 2021.
Well, that'll be 2018.
It will be 2018 born children.
Yeah. So parents of children born in 2018, you know, you might be enjoying, you know, you still have a baby or you have a toddler, but now is the time really to be thinking about entering school. And when we say school, it's primary school really, because if you don't enter when your child is 3, you're losing out on a lot of places. It's not impossible to enter when your child is 4, because some schools only take children at 4, but there are very few schools that take children at 5, right? Are there any, Nicola? There are some.
There are some, and there are also schools that have additional places for year 1 as well, but obviously then you're sort of playing a numbers game. Do you want to run that risk?
So the same applies if you have a child born in 2017 and you haven't secured a place for your child this August, that's August 2020, then do consider, if there's still a few weeks, if you want to consider doing that rather than wait till next year, because as we're saying, you know, if you miss out on the 3-year-old places, there may not be more 4-year-old places. There may be a few more, but there'll be more 3-year-old places than there are 4-year-old places. So how about, Nicola, how about for a child that's coming in from a different school, let's say a local school or a school overseas? How do the various schools decide on which grade is suitable for that child?
It would be easy to answer if they all use the same policy, and sadly they don't. It's going to depend partially on the school and also on the age of your child. The older the child, the more likely they would be to consider the grade level completed. But this is not a hard and fast rule. They're still going to want them to sit the entry assessments, especially if we're talking about sort of upper primary or secondary aged children. And they will then be benchmarking and looking at their existing cohort, especially if the child's coming from a different schooling system, maybe a different language and curriculum. So no real hard and fast rule on that one.
Let's just look at this chart again, which I got wrong a couple of times. So if you're just joining us, this is our age and stage summary. So if you have children born in 2019, this is also the right year to be looking at figuring out your child's pre-nursery spot, and so on and so on. So we've divided it into kindergarten, primary and secondary. But as we're saying, it's kind of a little bit of a false division, because it really does depend on the school, on when their main intake is. And parents might not necessarily know that, because let's be honest, the typical response is when you call up and ask, what's the deal? You know, do you have places or not? The typical response from almost every school to a parent is submit your application. And what we're trying to do is to help parents to minimize the number of applications that they submit unnecessarily. So it's really, really worth understanding what are the, whether or not that's feasible if you're submitting an application at all, whether it's worth doing that at all. Is there anything else to mention on age and stage, Nicola?
No, I'd probably just draw attention to some specific year groups. As we look ahead to August 2021, the admission cycle for that entry point is fast approaching. It's going to open at the end of this summer, August. So now is a key time for families to start thinking about that, especially as you've mentioned, 2019 borns applying for pre-nursery, 2018 borns for K1, 2017 for K2, or more likely to be called reception year group, or 2016 looking for year 1. And again, for slightly older children, those born in 2010, that might be looking to review their options for secondary school, now is the time to be thinking about that ahead of applications this autumn.
Absolutely. And just maybe worth mentioning as well, some of the, not the international schools, but the direct subsidy scheme schools, or some of the more local schools, their application cycles actually start earlier, and some of them have already started now, and that's for entry in August 2021. So I think the key things here are really understand. I know that you know when your kids are born, but map that onto the chart that we've posted in the comments below, and map that onto the grade. Like, so what grade, what class are you applying for in August 2021? When you know that, is to go back to all of your schools that you're considering and understand, do they accept children at this age? If so, how many spots? And if not, is that next year or the year after? And very unlikely that even the year after that. So I think that's it. Any parting comments of advice?
There's an excellent time, given we're not traveling, to be doing your homework and your due diligence for next year.
Yeah, good time to be doing the research. The schools are going to be closing in a few weeks, even though they've just reopened. And are we seeing schools accepting parents for visits?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Usually individual tours, sometimes very small groups, and some schools aren't. And you would need to be booking those for August onwards.
Yeah, but now's a really good time to be understanding about all the different options and what schools you might be considering applying to, and whether it's even worth considering applying to. So if you do need some professional guidance, please do get in touch with us or ask a question below. That's all on age and stage. And this has been Monday Mix for the 1st of June 2020. Thank you for joining us. See you next Monday. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.